Game of Thrones. The Sack of Astapor and Yunkai. The story of Daenerys Targaryen's liberation of the slave cities in Essos is one of fire, blood, and unyielding determination. Among the many battles of her journey, none shine brighter than the sack of Astapor and the storming of Yunkai, conflicts that reshaped the balance of power across the eastern continent and forged Daenerys into more than just a wandering exile. These battles were the crucible in which she transformed from a young claimant to the Iron Throne into the breaker of chains. The Seeds of War. Astapor, the red-brick city on Slaver's Bay, was infamous for its unsullied, eunuch soldiers trained from childhood to obey without question, immune to pain, and feared across the known world. Daenerys, traveling with her small colosar, her loyal advisors Ser Jorah Mormont and Barristan Selmy, and her 3 young dragons, came to Astapor seeking an army. The masters thought they saw an easy mark, a young girl far from home, eager to buy warriors, naive to the cruelty of their world. But Daenerys had grown wiser with every step of her journey. She saw the broken children turned into weapons, the cruelty of the masters, and she knew she could not simply purchase her army. She had to free it. The tension in Astapor built like a storm. Negotiations began with barbs and mockery. The slavers laughed at her offer of a dragon in exchange for the entire unsullied host. They saw only arrogance and desperation. What they did not see was Daenerys's resolve, her plan taking shape like the coiling of a dragon's tail before it struck. Fire unleashed. On the day of the exchange, the slavers gathered, gloating at the thought of possessing one of the great dragons of legend. Daenerys arrived with Drogon at her side, the beast restless and growling. The Unsullied, arrayed in perfect formation, stood silent as stone. The crowd of Astapori looked on, expecting to see another Targaryen broken. But Daenerys spoke not in the trade tongue, but in High Valyrian, a tongue the slavers assumed she did not know. With each command, the Unsullied shifted, their obedience turning away from the masters who had bought and sold them and toward the woman who offered them freedom. Then, with a word, she unleashed Drogon. The dragon's fire poured out in a storm of orange and black, searing flesh, toppling walls, and scattering slavers like leaves before the wind. Panic erupted in Astapor. The whips of the good masters cracked desperately, but the Unsullied did not turn back. For the first time, they fought not as slaves, but as free men following the mother of dragons. The streets of Astapor drowned in chaos. Masters fled into their red-brick mansions, only to be dragged out by the very people they had owned. Bells tolled frantically as if to summon order, but no order remained. The city burned as Drogon wheeled above, his wings blotting out the sun, his fire reducing centuries of cruelty to ash. By nightfall, Astapor belonged not to the slavers but to Daenerys Targaryen. She stood before the Unsullied, 1,000 strong, and told them they were free to leave or free to fight. Not one man left her side. They lifted their spears and pounded their shields in thunderous unison, their chant echoing through the ruins of Astapor, Mysa. The breaker of chains was born. The walls of Yunkai. But freedom was never welcomed without resistance. Beyond Astapor lay Yunkai, another city of Slaver's Bay, rich and powerful, its walls high and guarded by seasoned soldiers and mercenaries. The wise masters of Yunkai had watched Astapor fall with disbelief and rage. They believed themselves untouchable behind their walls, and they believed mercenaries could succeed where slavers had failed. Daenerys would prove them wrong. Yunkai was not Astapor. The Unsullied could not simply march in and overthrow their captors. The walls of the city loomed high, bristling with defenders. Daenerys sent envoys to parley, offering peace in exchange for the freedom of slaves. The wise masters laughed in her face, dismissing her as a foolish girl with stolen soldiers and pet lizards. They sent her gifts of gold and women, thinking to distract her. But Daenerys had seen enough chains to last a lifetime. When the gates of Yunkai remained shut, she prepared for war. Battle in the sand. The mercenary companies of Yunkai were fierce, but fractured. The Second Sons, the Stormcrows, and other free companies each fought for coin, their loyalty shifting with the wind. Daenerys, cunning as any queen, knew this. Some she turned with promises of gold and glory. Others she struck down in battle. The assault began under cover of night. The Unsullied advanced silently, their spears glinting like cold stars. At their head marched Grey Worm, their chosen commander, his face calm as stone. From the skies above came the roar of dragons, their shadows sweeping across the sands. The defenders of Yunkai rained arrows and stones, their war horns blaring. Yet the Unsullied never faltered. They pushed forward in disciplined formation, cutting through mercenaries and soldiers alike. The clash of steel echoed against the city walls, a storm of screams and fire rising with it. Then Drogon descended. His fire ripped across the gates, melting iron, shattering wood, and sending defenders fleeing in terror. The dragon's wings churned the air into a tempest, knocking men from the ramparts. Soldiers who moments before stood proudly now cowered in fear, their courage crumbling before the might of a dragon reborn. Daenerys herself rode close enough to witness the terror in their eyes. She was no longer the girl sold to Khal Drogo, no longer the beggar queen wandering the Red Waste. She was fire made flesh, the rightful heir of House Targaryen, and the wrath of her family's legacy burned behind her. Freedom's price. When the gates of Yunkai fell, the battle turned to slaughter. The Unsullied surged through, disciplined as ever, cutting down resistance with ruthless precision. Slaves poured into the streets, seizing weapons, turning on their masters. The wise masters, once draped in silks, found themselves stripped of power, their cries drowned out by the roar of the freed. Drogon circled above, his fire ensuring no rally could form. The other two dragons, Regal and Viserion, joined him, their shrieks splitting the night sky, their flames consuming siege towers and barricades. Against 3 dragons, no wall could stand, no gate could hold. By dawn, Yunkai was no more. Its golden walls stood blackened with soot, its rulers dead or fled, its people kneeling not in chains but in newfound freedom. Daenerys walked among them, her white hair bright in the rising sun, the chant of Mysa rising once more as thousands reached for her. The legacy of fire. The sack of Astapor and Yunkai was not merely conquest. It was the forging of Daenerys's destiny. She had gathered an army not of slaves but of free men who chose her as their leader. She had struck terror into the hearts of the slavers who had ruled for centuries. She had proven that dragons were not just legends of the past but weapons of the present. Yet these victories came with a price. Blood soaked the sands, innocents perished in the chaos, and the flames of her dragons consumed more than just chains. Whispers began to grow, whispers of a queen who wielded fire too readily, who spoke of freedom but ruled with destruction. Still, in that moment, Daenerys stood triumphant. The girl who had once walked the Red Waste with nothing now commanded cities, armies, and dragons. The breaker of chains had begun her march, and nothing in Essos, nor in Westeros, would ever be the same again.